Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. So today we've got this 2004 Arctic Cat 500 ATV and it won't start or run. So what we had going was we knew that the float was leaking, and so it was filling the carburetor all the way with gas and running out the overflow, and we ended up putting a new float valve in it and the problem continued. So I thought, well, possibly the float is messed up and won't float, or maybe the seat for that float needle was bad. But what I found was on eBay, they have these carburetors, and these are made in China, and this thing was like $50. But basically, here's a replacement carburetor. So we're gonna put this in and see if it ends up solving our problem. You'll find out when we do. So this is also kind of nice. It comes with a fuel filter for it, and this ATV doesn't have a fuel filter on it right now. So I'll add that in, that might help too. So let's get to it. So I'm gonna start by taking the old carburetor out. And so there are the two boot clamps, and then there's the throttle cable that has to come out. And there's a Phillips head screw at the top of the cover for the throttle cable. So we'll get the throttle cable off. Okay, now I'll loosen the throttle cable adjustment screw so I can take the cable out of the carburetor housing. And that just takes a 10mm wrench. Okay, now with that nut loose, we can take the, please bear with any explosions you hear. We live fairly close to a naval base, and they like to blow things up. And occasionally it rattles our barn. Okay, so that throttle cable is loose. Now we'll just rotate the carburetor out of the boot on the back, which it is. Now I'm going to lift that up out of the way. And our carburetor comes out the front boot. And we just pull it out. There we go. Almost. Okay, so with the carburetor, we've got the fuel line in and a vent. So we'll take those loose. Okay, here is the vent. And then we'll take a little pair of pliers to get the fuel line off. Okay, so with a pair of pliers, we can release the clamp on the fuel cable, fuel line. Okay, and I'll bend that up so I don't leak fuel all over my garage, because Maggie doesn't like that. And then the last thing we do is unplug our choke wire for the electric choke. Okay, so I'm going to take this carburetor outside and dump the gas out of the bowl, and we'll compare it to the new Chinese carburetor. See if we see any differences. Okay, so let's take a look at these carburetors. And this is the Arctic Cat one that came out, the factory one. And this is the Chinese aftermarket one. And first thing is, I'm going to reuse the vent tube that was on this one. So I'm going to take this off. I won't need that. And then this is the fuel intake line, and it's got a little plastic cover over it too to just protect it during shipping, not to get any moisture or anything in there. So pull that off. And that's the same as this valve. But looking at these carburetors, they look pretty much identical to me. They're whatever goes in this hole, they've got something over here, but obviously whatever that is not used on this ATV. That might be, some of these models were electronic fuel injected. Maybe that's something for that. I don't honestly know. This is the electric choke that is on this carburetor, and there's the plug for that, and there's the plug on the stock one. and they're identical. So I think this is going to be a pretty easy plug and play. All of the throttle cable assembly looks the same. So let's put it on and see if we can make this thing run. Okay, and this carburetor came with a little fuel filter, and I always think fuel filters are a good idea. Now I don't know if this one's very good or not, but I'm gonna stick it in the fuel line. So let's go ahead and do that. And if I put it about right here, I'll be able to see it and change it if I need to. So I'm gonna throw a couple little clamps on there. Okay, so the fuel flow direction is that way. So put this on. Put a little clamp on it. Throw a clamp on this hose. Then I'll put the filter here and clamp it. Okay, we'll tuck that back down, and then I'll just angle the top up so it doesn't drip. Okay, we'll put the carburetor in. Okay, so we've got the front boot in, and we've got the back boot in, and now I'll just tighten these screws. Okay, so I've got the front clamp and the back clamp put on. Now I'll put on my vent line, my fuel line, and the carburetor and the throttle cable. Okay, and there's the throttle cable put back on. Now I just need to put the end of the cable in the little cam. And I tried to film that, but it's just too crowded of a space and too dark. Okay, and I got the cam. I got the little wire back in the end of the cam, and the throttle cable works. So now I've got to hook up the electric choke and the fuel line and that vent. Okay, and here's our electric choke line, and it just plugs back in to the same connector that we unplugged the other one from. So there's the electric choke, and I'll zip tie that up once I confirm that it's going to run. For now, we're going to tuck it back in there. Okay, so I guess I'll put the cover on the carburetor, on the throttle cable. Okay, we'll put this cover on. Okay, so the vent line is on and the throttle cable cover is on. I think the last thing to do is plug in the fuel line and see if it runs. Okay, and hooking up this fuel line, I think I can do it easier from this side. So let's put this on. And we do have the filter now on here, which I think will only be a good thing. Okay, now move the clamp down, but I can't do that with one hand. Okay, so the fuel line is on the new carburetor, and that installation went pretty smooth. It only took a few minutes, and let's see if it'll run. Okay, let's see if we can get it to start. It's alive! Okay, so I think I need to turn the idle up a little bit, and I need to move some of my tools off of the machine because it's sitting there vibrating all over the place. Okay, so just like the other carburetor, the stock carburetor, there's this screw that moves the idle up. I'm going to turn that a couple turns, and that is actually a lot easier if you hit the throttle cable first to release the pressure off of it. So let me do that. Okay, so when I pull the throttle, now there's no pressure on that, and I'll just give it about a turn. Okay, I'm gonna start her up. We'll see what it does now. Okay, start it. There's the fuel pump, and here's that filter I added, and it's not leaking. Okay, let's take it out and do a test ride. People ask what these little driveway marker things are on here for. They're fiberglass, and they do a wonderful job of knocking the cobwebs down out of the trail. So you're welcome. All right, so that's the replacement for this Arctic Cat 500, and it's back in business. This OEM carburetor, I just looked it up, if you can see that. I don't know if it'll zoom in enough, but you can buy the OEM for $865, or this one right next to it for $49.95. And I'm not a big fan of like all those little Chinese motorcycles and stuff. I've messed with a bunch of them, and they usually are just basically junk after about 2 years. But we'll see how that carburetor works. Right now, it's got this thing running like a champ. So, gotta love that. And we're back in business. Thanks a lot for watching. Hope you have a great day. Be safe.